Yes, hi. I don't know if anybody can hear me, but the town of Telluride's microphone has been muted the whole time.
Oh, no. That's why his hand was raised. So I was wondering.
Okay.
No.
Okay, does he have any do you have any substantive comment, or is that what you wanted to tell us?
He hasn't heard a word.
No. Okay. Is there any other public comment?
Can you hear us now?
He's muted again, but you're on mute.
He's nodding, I hope.
Okay.
So there's no other public comment, Piper? All right. So we'll now proceed to discussion. What do people think about this? Kathy?
First of all, I do not want to use the number 2663.
Too precise?
It's too precise, and one of my big questions is whether we should make it 2,600 or 2,500. It doesn't mean we're going to get any less units or any less, it's just how you measure these things, and there's many ways to measure this, and rock walls are very thick. And I've had to redo an interior because the architect made a mistake and believed the outside, the outside realist, survey things were the inside numbers, and then he walked away. He didn't walk away, but he said, well, you guys just figure out how to fit everything in with a foot less of space, all the way around the building. So these are nightmares. So I just want to put in a lower number so we don't see this again. I'm mixed on the other thing about whether it should be eligible. The same ownership has a wonderful historic hotel in our downtown that's an integral part of our downtown. It also does not have a lot of employee housing because it was built so long ago. And it also has 100% of buyout parking because it was built so long ago. So I kind of feel like the extra square feet is making up for that. But I wouldn't mind if it got applied to other property, historic property that this group owns and wants to remodel, and then they're suddenly have to do some housing. But I don't want to see them turn around and sell it on the free market to someone totally different that's building a new project. But I'm not going to necessarily die in that ditch, but I really think this very much supports their other wonderful historic properties. They have several other ones.
Todd?
Yeah, as I'm thinking back to the approval of the PIL, we were concerned about double dipping on this project. And because this is only payment in lieu, and it's not the other commercial building on Unit C, I'm okay with striking that sentence. Like you, I don't like the legal threatening an argument, because that was done. I mean, it's almost 2 years ago, and the only reason it's coming back is the measurement changed. But outside of that, we're still getting the parking spaces for the deed restricted housing units. We're deed restricting them, and whether it goes through Sheridan or they go through public housing, they'll be used for the people who live in that building, which is what we all hope and intend. So I'm okay with this and prepared to make a motion.
Well, let's have some more conversation. I'm sure there are others who at least share.
Yeah, I echo Kathy's concern about the free market resale. I would love to see it reapplied to more additional affordable housing if that were to be the credit. I don't know if that's something we can include, but I actually agree with that because of the historic nature and the measurements. I can understand all that, but I would like to see it reapplied.
Can you help us out here?
I think I can. Speaking to the quote unquote legal threats, I think Mr. Johnson mentioned that you had acted previously in excess of your jurisdiction.
I did speak with this with attorney Kevin Geiger yesterday separately and before speaking with the applicant on these issues as well to see if we could come to some kind of not necessarily recommendation to P&Z, but we figured this issue would come up and I wanted to be prepared to address it to you. So what this really comes down to is there are 4 criteria for parking payment in lieu. In the original application, the applicant offered and you accepted something that went beyond those 4 conditions. That was the provision of the additional affordable housing. At the time, the applicant didn't really realize the value of what it was that they were freely offering. I think now they realize how great that value is and would now like to step that back some. So as to whether you acted in excess of your jurisdiction, Kevin and I are both of the opinion that no, you did not. It was offered, you accepted, there was an agreement. Now as to whether you would like to step back some, just because you might also understand how great an excess, what it is, whether they offered is completely up to you. There's probably a factual dispute as to whether that last sentence was part of what they had offered. So while they did offer affordable housing, deed restricted affordable housing, there's possibly a factual dispute as to whether they also agree that that could not be mitigate or banked for mitigation credits. It's possible. I'm not going to say there is a factual dispute. It's just there could be. So as Phil's memo does state, again, this condition did not originate with you. You did not require this. Staff did not require this. This was part of the application. It was offered and it was accepted. What I would encourage you to focus on is the alternative that the applicant states, not the lawsuit, but the alternative that they're going to exercise if you do not agree to this amended language. They'll knock down a wall and reduce the number of units, and they can do that. And will still have the same amount of square footage, but we'll have one less unit. So I would encourage you to focus on that alternative outcome rather than maybe some of the other considerations I've heard you state so far.
Ally, is it possible, consistent with the land use code or applicable, whatever, to craft a restriction so that the Sheraton can use it itself, but not sell these units as Kathy suggested, or is that not an option?
Let her answer.
Let Ally answer.
So again, that's not something that's been offered by them. I would try, because this is going beyond what staff ever would have brought up if they had not brought it up first. I would stay away from maybe those other conditions on this affordable housing and just stick to what they have offered and either accept it as is or not make it part of the conditions.
All right, thank you, Chris.
Yeah, thank you. There's no intent for these to be moved away from the new Sheraton. And Ray can speak to that. I mean, in the end, it's something they're gonna keep these. I mean, it benefits them as an employer. They have to have these. It's a fact of our reality, and anyone that buys the new Sheraton in the future is gonna want those for their housing. I don't think you have to dictate that as a condition. It's the reality of the market conditions. Now and into the future, as new Sheraton is operated as a hotel, what will the new Sheraton be in 50 years or 100 years? I don't know. But to tie it to new Sheraton in perpetuity would be a little problematic, I think. But I can tell you from a business perspective, they will not sell these units off. It's precious to get employees. If you have housing, you can get employees. If you don't have housing, you can't get it. It's difficult to get employees. So thank you for your consideration of it.
All right. Brad, did you want to add anything to that?
I think Chris said that very well, and I think that is exactly my sentiment. We, we're working with the town on the right language to deed restrict these units. My goal is to maintain our employees in those units, and ensure and prove to you that they are qualified San Miguel residents, and those are extremely important to us, and there's no intent to sell.
And if I could just add, under the housing credits that are issued, if we can make it clear that this You know, it's not to purchase the units, it's not to sell the units, it's if someone's buying that, they understand they're gonna remain rental units. So it's just a housing credit that's there, so. And so structurally and how that works, because some people don't want to manage those units, they just want to buy it, and that negotiated price. You know, who knows what that's gonna be, but in the end, it's structured by them to retain the controlling interest in it. And provide they sell it, because especially with the house, the new 90% requirement on homes. There's, well, maybe not after this code amendments go through, but there's a provision, once you get to a certain size house, you have to provide an on-site housing unit. And so people, that's the sort of person I think they market to, is saying, do you want to buy that credit? And then that credit remains in NSCs and they can do what they want. Because they don't want to devalue the property to be restricted. And that's the reality of this. And there's a prime market for that under current code conditions, so.
Charles, did you have a question?
I just want to clarify, if they sell the credit to someone else, is that, I mean, are we losing an affordable housing unit on another project that doesn't occur, or?
Possibly.
Yes, I mean, I think what Chris described is that scenario.
And that's, some people don't want to provide housing on site because they're smaller projects.
Yeah.
200 square feet here, 100 square feet there. I've found these credits by developers at bottom and then putting them into projects, so it's mostly smaller amounts than anything else. And the credit system is good because it provides an incentive to provide more housing when it's available. And that was the reason the credit system was set up in the first place.
Okay, so either sometime down the road in the future, either the town is not going to get an affordable housing unit, or is not going to get
A buyout.
a buyout
Right.
from somebody that
Somebody
only
else.
needs a smaller, so that $700,000 or whatever is
Yeah.
eventually not going to the town for affordable housing.
If there's a concern with the credit system, it's there. If you don't think that should exist, that's a code conversation, you know, that's a good conversation to have occasionally to see if you want to allow those or not.
And then just
What I say, Charles?
my other just clarification or question is your alternative that y'all talked about as far as making it 4 units versus the 5 units to not need the actual parking space. It would still be the same total square footage of affordable housing, the 2663 approximately. It would just be one of the units would be larger.
That's
A larger
correct,
unit.
but that would not be my preference. My preference would be to
Have a lot.
maintain the, 6 individual apartments.
But there is a, I guess I would say, a need for larger affordable housing units than just the smallest ones, I guess, too. I mean, it's not,
Yeah, some people
I
would
mean,
want, some people.
we're not
people would
losing.
want it.
It's
Not,
just one
not,
less,
not for my
That's not,
business.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just one less family, and just for the credits, and I'll be quiet after this. There's an employee apartment in the back of Brown Dog, right? That was bought, that credit, a long time ago by a hotel in town. That owner of the hotel no longer owns that credit, but the housing is there. Right, so the credit can evolve over time. It's still housing, it's still providing the community, and it's paid in advance, but that's just one example of how it's been used historically. They're very unique things that you may have not even heard of.
Todd, did you have a question?
Thank you.
To your point, if in the future that results in either us not getting that many square footage of affordable housing, or we get it now. And that's a future if come, but this is, particularly if we do this, we get 5 units, which is about double what the requirement would have been. So it's a trade, yes. But it's a trade at a time when we're in desperate need of housing.
May I
yes,
please
Ray.
clarify with Charles that, with my particular business, I don't employ families. I employ individuals, and So for us, 6 apartments are better than 5. And our preference would not to knock down the wall and make a larger unit.
So, let me go back to our discussion here. Thank you. So I take it that the commission has agreed that we're not getting rid of condition 2. We still want the applicant to have a condition to deed restrict the units. Is that am I correct?
That's right.
Yes.
Where we're at is, and we agree that they should be located on unit B. And we have Kathy's suggestion that we change approximately this very specific number to at least a lower number. How do you feel about
2,500,
that?
yeah.
At least
26,
26, at least 25,
Let's do 25, just in case there's.
Yeah.
at least 25. Let's use at least.
Yeah.
Right, we have a 4. And then how do we feel about the last sentence? Yes, out, yes. Yes, out. All right, Todd, you have a motion?
I move to approve this request for a payment in lieu of 1 parking space pursuant to Land Use Code Section 6-114 for the property located at 133 East Colorado Avenue, with the findings and conditions set forth in the staff report of record dated January 5th, 2022. Finding,
Wait.
There was a new
well,
motion
that's
that
the, sta-
Bill had.
it is.
Yeah, I'll stop sharing this.
There's.
Yeah, I've got,
I'm reading from Phil's memo.
We don't have a new one.
This
The
is- this is it.
original motion is in there.
So we have to go halfway through the staff report because your old staff.
I think
report
that
is
was the
fine.
old, so if you want to read this one, it's page 13 of 52.
yes, 13 already.
I read it on here, yeah.
Start all over again. I move to approve an amended request for a payment in lieu of 1 parking space pursuant to Land Use Code Section 6-114 for the property located at 133 East Colorado Avenue, with the findings and conditions set forth in the staff report of record dated June 6th, 2023, following findings and conditions. 1 finding, the application is in compliance with the applicable review standards in the Telluride Land Use Code, payment in lieu of parking review criteria. Conditions: 1, the applicant must provide 1 ADA parking space on site. 2, the applicant must deed restrict at least 5 existing free market residential units as affordable housing units in conformance with the land use code and the affordable housing guidelines. These deed restricted units must be located in Unit B and total approximately
No,
total at least 2,500 square feet. This motion is based on evidence and testimony provided at a public hearing held on June 22nd, 2023, with notice of such hearing provided as required by the Telluride Land Use Code.
Thank you, God. Do I have a second?
Second.
Yeah.
We didn't insert the LUC language.
Yes, yeah.
He did.
Oh, thank you, sorry, thank you very
He
much.
said, he said
He said-
land use code.
He said.
Sorry.
That's what.
All
Thank
right,
you, thank you.
thank you. Do we have a second?
Is the
Yeah,
second.
okay, sorry.
Yeah.
All right, is there any discussion? No, all in favor? All right, the motion passes.
Thank you
very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks for letting us talk that out.
Yeah.
Thank
That's good.
you.
All right. So we now move on to our work session. Somebody call Peter?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, our first item is land use code amendments. It's the work session to discuss potential amendments to the land use code pertaining to new construction on lots with a pre-construction grade of 25% greater in residential zone districts. new construction with below grade site coverage in residential zone districts, and new construction which includes 2 or more levels below grade in residential zone districts per land use code section 5-201C. Staff member is Jonna. Let's wait for Peter. This is reading. Time. He'll be here hopefully momentarily. So.
Beautiful weather.
Finally.
Are we on a ferry?
Not during.
Wait,
this-
Goodness.
But I have to practice evacuating the town park now that
Mhm.
that's the thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
From everything I've heard, it went about as smoothly as possible.
Yeah, the first one
The
was
first
better.
one was great.
The second one.
Second one was chaotic.
Tired. Again?
All right. Peter's back. Sorry.
Ready?
Go.
Right.
Hmm.
Okay, good evening, Planning and Zoning Commission.
John, you may want to move that microphone to you. Pointed at you.
Have been a little bit fragile lately. So I'm sure you all remember, we met last month to talk about a few of the temporary suspension items. I talked with you specifically about basements and hillside development specifically. So we're going to do this one more time, and we have a little bit more input or feedback for you tonight, and would love to have your feedback for me. I did this presentation for Hark last night, so they have seen the same information, and we will just get started. Just a reminder that these were the items that were in the temporary suspension from March 28th. The PUD related item and the residential commercial zone district item have been approved by town council. So those we've checked off the list. I know Ron's already spoken with you once about ballot question 300. He's going to do that again this evening. And then the other 3 items, again, regarding hillside lots or steep lots, basements, and site coverage bonus area, I will talk to you relatively briefly about tonight. So when we met last time, I asked you to give me some idea of what your goals were. This list of goals is what I took away from you and took away from Hark at the last work session. And those goals were to eliminate double basements, to simplify the rules for bonus site coverage, to align the Hark application scale with the actual floor area, which I'll explain in a minute, to reduce visual impact of 3- and 4-story structures on the hillsides, to retain the look and feel of Telluride's traditional mass and scale on the hillsides, and to limit the environmental impacts of demolition and new construction in town. So I'm going to go through each of these goals and give you some recommendations that staff has come up with, and that Hark seems to be on board with at this point. So again, I'm going in reverse order, but our first item is to, our first goal is to eliminate double basements. This one's pretty straightforward, but we have divided this issue up into steep lots and less steep lots. And again, I'm not sure how to call this. Right now, I'm calling them less steep lots, but it could change to gradual or gentle lots. I'm not sure. But this one is fairly easy to achieve. On less steep lots or relatively flat lots, we would not allow a basement below the first basement. So I think the illustration shows that fairly accurately. We could probably include an illustration like this in the land use code to be very clear about what that is, but it should not contain more than one floor level below the finished grade. And this again is on flatter lots. Flatter lots at the site coverage. So when I'm talking about steep or flatter lots, the grade I mentioned is 25% or more would be a steep lot, and that's just of the footprint of the structure. It's not the entire lot. And that is consistent with our current land use code language. So is everybody on board with this approach?
I have questions.
Yes.
So this is a kind of a front elevation and it's compressed. It's the short, not the long. The long front to back is way more telling and slope accumulates more. So typical Main Street residential lot, say where you got a Main Street elevation there we're looking at on the south side and a garage level or a level below this in the green elevationally where that green is the garage drive-in. You can have a basement, I think by this definition, otherwise a level below that lower grade level of site coverage and still comply. But it's different than that diagram noticeably. So it is an additional level of basement, not more than a level below grade, just like this is not more than a level below the higher grade.
Yeah, but
So-
that would not meet the intent of this.
So I'm just trying to clarify whether I'm
Yeah.
in support. I'm trying to tell you that's not
Yeah.
really the
No,
half
I
of it.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you expand on that? Because I thought what I understood you to say, and I own one of those houses.
Yeah,
On the south side of Colorado Avenue,
Mhm.
where the street level like this is an existing grade, but the rear elevation, existing grade, the garage is exposed.
Yeah.
I mean, it's grade level,
And it's a basement.
and then, well, it's not a basement because
It is if it's more than 50% below grade.
But it could be yes, or it could be yes.
It could be yes.
both, and it should be
Could be
contemplated
either.
as such.
But the intent of this is below that garage,
Yeah.
which is at grade at the alley. No further basement.
Yes. That's the intent, I believe. But I appreciate the example. So actually, the next recommendation for the steep lots might get to the same place, and maybe it applies to both. I will show you that next, and then we can circle back. And I tested this with Hark yesterday, and we kind of think that this works for steep lots, which again have a slope of 25% or greater. The idea is to avoid this basement below entry level. But we would define that as no level that's below the post-construction grade low point
For steep lots.
for steep lots.
Right.
But I'm thinking now, as you mentioned in the previous example, it might work for flat lots as well. Flatter lots
Flatter.
with
No.
the,
You might have one really true flat lot in this whole town. but-
it's relative. I'm trying to not have to
Sloped.
speak so many words.
So the post-construction grade low point.
Low point. Which would address the garage.
Yeah.
On a
Mhm.
That town
language.
lot, Main Street lot. Peter,
So this slide is trying to prohibit, again, basements below arrival grade driveway.
Yes.
Which is straightforward and understandable. This slide is also, I don't want to jump ahead, and I'm just wanting to also not forget to make a mention, an example of home that's not going to have fewer than 2 or 3 basements above that level you've Xed out.
That's why those red arrows are pointing at basement levels.
Okay, great.
So
Thanks.
no fourth basement, easy. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
I guess, you know, when we came at this first, we thought, well, no basement below entry level, but entry level could be the second
right.
level above.
Yeah.
Or no level below garage, but a garage could also be 1 story below grade. So I think that the post-construction grade low point gets to the point where you should have no basement below. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
And does that work for this example? If you're on a main street lot?
To me, as a conversation, I'm curious what Hark might have talked about or what everybody else, public or P&Z's thoughts on that are. I know the Aspen example, if I'm remembering correctly, we talked about last on this subject, was limiting just a distance below site grade, which would allow for a basement below a low point, not necessarily on the hillside, but say in this core areas. You could have a basement, as Todd described, below the alley, lower grade. And so I don't just throw in and say, okay, yeah, we're just stripping basements there. That feels like a basement to me above a walk-in. It doesn't feel like a basement generally. To me, I'm curious what other people's thoughts, if that's something they are motivated to get rid of or restrict.
I'm thinking of the north side of Colorado Avenue now, where the alley is typically, not always, but mostly
Yeah,
way above
Right.
the front sidewalk or the front entry to the house. And, but I think they need to be, maybe to have basements, because they're gonna have an above grade garage.
And they
Or do
could.
something really crazy. They're gonna put other square feet in to do their garage. So I mean, and this would allow it, and the 12 feet is the number you're asking for, Peter. And so it gives you a little bit taller ceiling in that basement. And plenty of room for all the structural, stuff you need to build the first floor. So I support this and support the previous one both. And it always made me nervous when I was building 2-story window wells.
Other thoughts?
Yeah. Curious, just as in getting detailed stuff. I see somebody in the back here raising their hand too.
Sorry, I just have a question. What's the root problem with basements? I may have missed a meeting, which is highly likely.
So we identified a couple of problems with basements in our last meeting. First off, that you are disrupting, when you dig very deep, particularly, this is a particular concern on the hillside. We don't know what the cumulative effect of the hydrology, on the hydrology
Yeah.
would be. And so you could very well be erecting a large cement wall
Okay.
and sending the water flow in a narrow channel down to your neighbor. We don't know, but it should the owner, on whom is the onus to prove the environmental damage?
Oh, that's already a requirement of the town regulations that I've scratched my head about many times.
So,
good, thank you.
but the question is, what about the cumulative impact? And the second question, the second issue is the impact on the town and particularly on the neighbors of having 4 and 5 stories of digging going on for 5 or 6 years. Which has in fact happened and is, when you're living on the edge of a precipice, it's not very pleasant. And so we have some other.
I have some other, can you go back to your very opening?
Thank you, Don.
slide?
Appreciate that. I'm just.
We're not done with the explanation.
Okay.
Go back to the picture you had up
Forward,
first.
forward.
Yeah,
This one.
Okay, so this is a relatively flat lot and they dug, they put in their piles or whatever, lot line to lot line basically, and dug the whole thing out and took away a lot of dirt. They don't get to build any more than 50% site coverage. And so a lot of dirt's gonna have to come back. Why didn't they put in smaller walls? This is the kind of.
You're talking about shoring walls?
Shoring walls. I
Okay.
mean, yeah, this is the kind of thing, when they excavate like this, maybe they're not really damaging the property next door. But this was a huge impact on the neighborhood to take away all the fill and to bring back the new fill when they get the fancy basement in there. And this was, to me, I looked at this and when you're on the sidewalk, if you fell in there, you'd probably die. And all they have is a flimsy piece of fencing and they don't have Jersey barriers.
So the site looks familiar to me for some reason. So, I'd just like to engage the people who designed that and why they did that.
Yes.
That's all I'm trying to understand. So thank you. I appreciate it.
And then the other thing we had a work session with town council, Hark and P&Z.
Right.
And all of these items came out of that. And sometimes town council was leading the way, not Hark, not P&Z. Town council was in a pretty, we need to get things under control mood that day. And I think I can say that without exaggeration.
And I'm just trying to understand it. I think it'd be helpful for the structural engineers and architects who designed that to, weigh in on why they did that, because I don't know the answer to that
It's probably
myself.
cheaper to make a rectangle than to do the excavation with the
Could be,
little.
and I don't
6
disagree with
tracks.
your concerns that you stated, so.
I was gonna add for Chris's benefit and a review, the picture that we had where we were digging into the hillside. Not only has a cumulative effect on, in terms of the hydrology, the groundwater, et cetera, drainage left over on the side. But it also has in your face 5-story building that is out of scale with the town.
Yeah,
That is a very big concern.
yeah,
And we have built mostly on the sloping to flat lots in core, and now we're facing the rest of the vacant land. And this kind of thing is just not.
Yeah. and I've certainly
Yeah.
seen some of the big digs in town, so I just wanted to understand it. Thank you.
Further to that, and also to you, Chris, having owned an example of both this one and the previous one
I've owned a lot of property. Yeah.
at one time or another.
Yeah.
Those are non-habitable spaces. Because in most of town, because of the floodplain requirements, and even with what amounts to 2 or 3-story window wells for egress, it's, in my opinion, it's not practicable. It's putting window wells into those easements, the setbacks, which effectively negates that. And during our winters, they're really not usable. So we are, by allowing this, encouraging people to skirt the health and safety regulations and put temporary sleeping bags down there or something that turn into suites that are dangerous, frankly, and we're enabling that, or we have enabled that, and if we ought to proceed in this direction, not allow any more of them.
Well, look, a lot of jurisdictions don't allow construction on steep slopes, period.
At all.
And they don't want to have to deal with how to regulate it when there are these obvious dangers that some of which you pointed out. Yes, Kathy.
Oh, I was also gonna say, there was one thing we could stick in those spaces that was kind of essential. It was the mechanical room. And I was really, as a builder, I was really tired of building mechanical rooms that the maintenance people, whether it was the plumber or the heating person or the electrician, could not get in. It was so full. But technology has changed. The big boilers, the big hot water tank storage systems are all kind of obsolete, don't meet our current energy codes. We're probably going to go to things that are even smaller in the future. So, we can probably go back to the Jim Burley special where your boiler room was a double door closet. And it will work, and then you can put it above grade and you don't need, like 150 square feet in your basement to be your mechanical room. Or in some houses cases, it's 200 or 300 square feet.
So let's go back to trying to help John. Thoughts here. Peter.
I just comment 12 feet, what that is measured to, drilling into this floor assembly, 1.5 feet thick, and floor below, close to 1.5 feet thick with footers. You can have fill, What are we measuring that to?
Finished floor
Finished grade.
Okay, thank you.
and finished grade.
All right, are there other thoughts about John?
The finished floor level shall be no more than 12 feet below finished grade.
And finished grade is defined as the midpoint of the footprint.
It's flat.
Well, they can be gentle.
The floor should. be
No, the
flat.
floor is flat,
The
but
finished grade is
the
the
finished-
post-construction grade after, I mean,
But if
Right.
it's on a sloping side.
if it's
you
a,
have to-
if it's a gentle slope,
It'd probably be the midpoint.
the midpoint. For the finished grade.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, it just sunk in, yes.
Not finished floor.
All right, I think we're good with this,
Good to-
Johnny. You can.
okay,
proceed.
so-
Sorry,
It's always a good to
let's, Peter has one.
So are you,
purpose.
and I don't want to jump ahead, but basic question, are you recommending that double basements on steep hillsides are not allowed?
We can't call them double basements because we have 3 basements
So,
on
yeah,
a
so
hillside.
there's
We're
no,
saying no basement below the post-construction grade low point.
Thank you.
And I mean, we all understand that those 3 don't function as basements because they have above grade exposure, but by definition in our land use code, they are basements. So yes, this is a little bit different in the way we word it. But if you're all in agreement with the principle of
Yeah.
eliminating these extra sub basements, then we can move on.
Sounds like we're good.
Okay. The next goal was to simplify the rules for the bonus site coverage. The bonus site coverage has been in the land use code for probably 7 or 8 years. And applies to residential zone districts. I think I mentioned last time, there's been a lot of errors in the application of this section of the code and the use of the bonus site coverage. So our goal was to keep it. I think everyone was supportive of keeping it. It is up to 10% of the lot area with a maximum of 525 square feet. So it does make a difference. But we have simplified it so that the rules are a little bit easier to follow. So for number 1, the rule is that 100% of the bonus site coverage area has to be below grade. You cannot see any portion of it above grade. There has been a provision since this was written that you could have a portion of it above grade if it were below a porch or a deck up to 18 inches. That is very confusing and it has been misused. We've allowed it up below a front porch and it ended up having windows. Might be below deck or have it, yes, wrong. So our proposal is to eliminate that portion and it has to be 100% below grade, period, wherever it is. Number 3, that last sentence really was just redundant, so we deleted it. It referred back to condition or criteria number 2. Criteria number 4, again, is just to clarify that the site coverage increase area cannot exceed 10% of the lot area up to a maximum of 525 square feet. So if you have a 6,000 square foot lot, the maximum bonus site coverage area is 525 square feet. And that is not changing anything, it's just clarifying it because people tend to sometimes think that it's 10% of the allowable site coverage, which is fine, but it's less than what they're entitled to. Criteria number 5 previously was that the site coverage increase area may not be located less than 3 feet from the side yard property lines. We think it should be from all property lines.
But do we want, the 10 and 15 feet are the kind of the common front and backyard things? Do we want it to go within 3 feet up there, those?
We
Yeah.
do, we do now.
Peter, you had a comment?
sorry, Kathy's question. To me, I think not initially, because if you have a setback and it's 15 feet at the front, as sort of typically they tend to be, you can imagine a front porch meeting the other language in the code about being below grade, but being in front of that, whatever its size, that would be an opportune area as opposed to a green roof for something like that, or under similar porch in the back that I would say would naturally want to live in the space that exists between that 15-foot setback closer to the front. Similar argument to the rear, perhaps.
I mean, the 3 foot is the legal language that nothing can be closer. So I understand that, but I don't think, I think if they want less than 15 feet front yard or less than 15 feet front backyard, they should have to go to Hark for approval, have a justification. Because I really don't think, I mean, Angela can speak like you need some place to plant some trees and bushes. We like landscaping.
So one of the rules, number 2, is that the site coverage increase area has to project beyond the foundation wall of the above grade building. So that's the natural, the front and the backyard are going to be the natural places for those to go.
But it's also a part of a Hark review.
It is going to
already.
naturally be part of a Hark review, yeah.
So essentially, you're eliminating backyards. If I
You're
understand
not
this right.
Well,
eliminating
it's up to Hark every time,
backyards.
to be fair.
This area is 100% below grade. So
But
Could have something on top of it.
you could have,
In fact, you probably will have something.
you'll have something on top of it. It probably won't be trees.
Which is why I sort of describe it's oftentimes convenient to locate it under some sort of a porch or a terrace or something that's not a green space. It's not
Yes.
trying to manage trees or.
And I guess getting back to number 5, which kind of prompted this. Before now, or now, there was no set front or rear yard setback at all. It was only the side yard setback that was required.
Yeah.
We could increase the front and side yard setbacks for this and leave the 3 foot.
I'm not
side yard.
comfortable with this, obviously, because it eliminates ability for root space. And it will be just have hardscape from alley to the street.
This is what Hark's for. I think you're just setting outer parameters, what people can ask for, and you can say, no, we need these root spaces.
I think
guess-
we should be stated more clearly that we want that kind of space preserved. Rather than expecting somebody to come in and say, this is what I want, and just try to justify it, and you guys be in a position where, no, you have to deny, but without having any real
I guess the
policy.
control is that the 10% of the lot area doesn't mean that the entire space between the house and the front or rear yard property line is going to be built. That's likely where it will go, but it probably, if you're talking 10% of the lot area, it's maybe 250 square feet on a regular size lot. And oftentimes, as I showed you last time, it's broken up into little bits here and there at the corners or filling in jogs in the foundation. So I'm not imagining it as a solid concrete front yard rear yard. It happens more in the accommodations zone districts where there are no setbacks. In residential zone districts, we just don't see that happen and I think there's landscaping expected.
Dan?
I just wanted to say, maybe this will answer your question from my perspective. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is more stringent. Since it says,
Okay.
Mhm.
yeah,
And since we didn't have anything to start with.
yes, so I think that might assuage your concerns, Angela.
I don't know, Hark does not have a great track record about site approval stuff. They concentrate on the buildings, which is their work. But the site is oftentimes not considered, and the cumulative effect, like I mentioned, the drainage and the 3 foot setbacks, I have concerns about. The cumulative effect is that it's our urban forest.
I certainly hear your concern. I don't need to get way in on the debate, I don't know if it's appropriate, but
And I don't know if I'm, it just is facing me like this, I'm just imagining, something where there's nothing.
So
Able to
do you
grow,
want to
so-
propose something greater? For
I
the
think
front?
having some examples would be more helpful in graphics to explain how this might be applied. Peter, maybe you can.
Peter?
I was just wondering if, language in this portion of the code about bonus site coverage just speaks to root space or having some balance of other things that are going to be a part of Parks consideration. Or maybe that's better in the guidelines somehow related. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
So John, if we have 10% and we put it, I too am searching for a visual here. It's like, if the house occupies as much space as it can on the standard lot, and then they have the bonus space, how much of the front yard can they take up?
Depends on the lot and the placement
There's-
on the lot. There are a lot of
there's a lot of
variables.
variables, a lot of varying conditions. So it's anything
Yeah,
under the sun to a degree.
it's hard to generalize.
Maybe we need to make a commitment to look at this in 2 years. I don't think 1 year is long enough to get enough applications and see them go in the ground and what the problems are. But maybe in 2 years, we need to make a commitment between Hark and P&Z that will come back and look at this and see if it's working or if we need to change, tighten up the language or reduce the percentage or whatever that's not working.
What if we said 5 feet from the front and back property lines? That's enough room for a tree, I think. Some trees. Small trees.
Small tree.
So that's where all the geo.
And the access from water and sewer.
Yeah.
Sometimes electrical, although that's usually.
Maybe that's not. what
Which
we
is a
want.
problem today. I mean, I just
Yeah, yeah.
saw a project that didn't have room for trees because they had water and sewer lines in the
Right.
side yard.
Right.
That's not going away, but. We can circle back to this or,
I
I think this works, but I think we just need to think about it, re-examine it, not in 10 years, but in 2 years and see if it's working.
Well, and I think Peter has a good idea, which is maybe this is something that we should put specifically into the Hark guidelines. In a way that can be referred to by Hark. So we don't have to just say, well, we like more plants. It's like, no,
I agree.
guideline says you have to have enough space for a tree to grow somewhere in your yard. Or whatever it says, you know. Yes, Peter, did you have something?
The office occupation we saw 2 months ago was a house right on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
And that's, that in the range of what are the possibilities?
Yeah.
I have sort of comments here on your list that I'd like to touch on. I'm gonna flip quickly.
Okay,
On
Is it
this
appropriate
list?
on this slide? Yeah,
one last comment, Peter, before we leave this one, is go to number.
I want to comment on this one too. You go first.
Oh, I was just gonna say, in that example, we have landscape guidelines for the town that don't allow trees in the space between the curb and the sidewalk. So where else are we going to get shade? I just put that out there.
Well, that's why maybe we need something in the Hark.
More houses.
Yeah.
All right, you guys have a comment.
On number 1, where you've referenced adjoining ground, I'm curious if pre or post construction grade, whichever's more restrictive, that's what you're getting at, or if there's a reason.
that
adjoining
is
grade.
existing language that's
Okay.
not being changed.
Thank you. Okay. Number 2. You're basically trying to say,
That is existing language that's not being changed.
okay, all right. Can you describe number 6? What is the intent? What?
I don't think we got there yet.
We haven't gotten there
Okay,
yet.
great.
Are we past number 5?
We're
yet?
past number 5.
For now.
We're leaving it alone. If the recommendation that Hark say so, we have some Hark guidelines about it.
Okay, we'll talk about guidelines in a moment. Number 6, the site coverage increased area may not be applied to more than one level below grade. This gets back to no double basements. However, as a Hark member pointed out last night, this doesn't work as well on steep lots or hillside lots because you have multiple basements. So I think we will differentiate in this section as well, so that on a hillside lot, you may have it on more than one level.
Is the intent, why is this a concern? And just out of curiosity.
Well, if we go back to this, we wouldn't want to see site coverage bonus area in a double basement or a sub basement, which we've just agreed we don't want to see.
But if we
But-
don't have any at all, how can
Go-
they put
go
the
to
bonus coverage there?
Go to the hillside one. So I guess if they
On
wanted
this
to
one,
bump out
and
in the
there,
back.
if you see these lighter red squares,
Yeah.
those are site coverage bonus areas that are stacked below grade. So this again is a little bit different situation where, you know, these are they're basements with site coverage bonus on more than one level. There appears to be a pretty clear distinction.
And is that a problem for us, I guess?
I don't
Right,
think it's
I
a
don't
problem. We just need to distinguish between,
I can imagine, and I'm not familiar with it personally, but where you would have things that are not in that 25% steep category, less than that, but have levels that might otherwise meet the definition of basement. And it feels like a penalty, and I'm not really sure I'm understanding if we're restricting it for reason. I can understand the slide, but I'm searching for examples of this in a sort of in between category description of lot that slopes but it's not steep, and why one level is okay and why one is somehow all of a sudden bad if it's
I'm
set
not
up.
saying it's bad. I'm saying
Yeah.
that I think the group, you know, the boards have decided that they don't want to see the double basements on lots with a slope of less than 25%. I guess again, it goes back to the degree of the slope of the site coverage, and if it's more than 25%, you could have the bonus site coverage area on more than one level, and if it's less, you could not, because you're only limited to the one level basement.
But still, if you're only limited to one basement, then why do you need,
Oh, then you don't need this rule.
you don't
because-
need this rule, it seems to me.
You need
Right.
it for this situation.
Whether we
Right.
want to allow the red.
Bonus.
share.
Why do we care whether they spread it out over three levels
Yeah.
or only apply it to the top one?
We're not caring. The idea is to eliminate it from this situation.
All right.
Okay.
And then the other one is actually good that it's lower down, because then you could put a tree in above it and it would grow.
Right.
Take a while for it to-
Back to our
to
trees?
Waterproofing, yeah.
I didn't listen in last night.
Are
I
you good?
don't know how Hart reacted to that.
They
Um,
were,
yeah.
they talked about the difference, because on this hillside lots, we're gonna have, there's no reason to eliminate more than one area of bonus site coverage per level, so it's fine. So we, sorry, number 7, we added, right now, the bonus site coverage area is used to calculate the height of the building, which doesn't seem to make sense to anybody because it's 100% below grade, and it's messed up some,
How-
I
how
think,
can-
3 projects
By
recently.
definition, how can it affect the measured height?
In this original language,
Yeah.
the site coverage bonus area was used to calculate height.
Got it.
Yes, doesn't make sense
So it's
to
a
anybody.
correction.
So we're going to explicitly say that it does not affect the height of the building. Great.
Clarification.
I think previously it was considered site coverage, which
Oh,
does contribute to the height of the building, but because this is bonus, it's 100% below grade, it should not be counted.
Good.
Comfortable? Okay, so now we're gonna talk more specifically about the hillside lots or steep lots, which
Hand over hand.
again, yes, we're calling 25% or greater of the site coverage, not the entire lot, just the portion that the house sits on. So the next goal was to align the HARC scale with the floor area. This has come up since we revised the land use code to change the scale of some of the HARC applications. And what we found is that some of these hillside projects, even though they may be 6,000 square feet total, they're only maybe 900 square feet above grade, which is an insubstantial HARC application. And no one is really comfortable with that. So what we are proposing is that any new development of a principal structure, so just we're talking about houses, not sheds or garages, but a principal structure on a steep lot, 25% or greater, shall be a small scale HARC application and require full HARC board review regardless of floor area.
And that's because floor area only applies to the, when you say floor area there, you mean the part that's sticking up.
The orange part.
It's,
in the
it's
cross
only,
section.
in this illustration, it's only the top floor that
Right.
counts as floor area.
Okay.
So that's why we
Hmm.
feel that any new construction of a house is going to feel like a small scale HARC application.
And how did Art feel about this one?
Loved it.
We do too.
Okay, great. The next goal was to reduce the visual impacts of 3 and 4 story structures. One of the ways that we can do this is to reduce the parallel slope, which is a fixed point, 30 or 31 feet, depends on the zone district, above the slope at which is the maximum height. So the roof cannot exceed that height. I dug into this a little bit to see what we are seeing as far as the proposed heights on the projects that HARC has approved recently. So this is a little bit odd, but in Hillside Transitional, which is this bright green area in the map above, the residential and historic residential zone districts, which are the mint green, the maximum parallel slope is 30 feet. And we're seeing that in these zone districts, nearly all of these projects are meeting the maximum. They're going to the max. In Hillside Developing 2, which is the pink area over here, it's a 31-foot maximum parallel slope, but none of the projects are getting anywhere close to it. And no one knows for sure why that is, why they're not seeking the maximum height, but Peter probably knows, and my guess, see if I'm right, is that the lots are deeper. There's more room to push the house back up the hillside. These lots over here on Curtis and Dakota are steeper and shallower. So they're sticking out higher, but I would love to hear what Peter has.
I think they start out farther underground. There were going to be 3-4 story buildings just to get out. And getting to 31 feet is a 7-story kind of get there.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's, to your point, though, it's not as much a concern. But the red area, Primrose or HD2s are they're restricted by volume as well.
Yes.
And some not to.
And we're not seeing those maxed out generally either, so.
So the challenge, I think that the language, a thing I have noted in the code and rather steep things in the HD zone is that if you start out 15 feet below ground, like where you walk in your basement entry or garage, you're 15 feet below ground, you've got, and the language in the code describes pre or post construction grade, whichever is more restrictive, so that you're starting out in a 15-foot hole. And so these 16 and 21 and whatever these lower numbers measured from existing grade, I buy, but I'm guessing some of those measured from driveways or at that sort of maximum vertical measurement might be trickier within that description.
But if you look at this example, this is a good one. This one's probably 15 feet below the parallel slope at any point.
Mhm.
So the question is, do we need to address this? These lots, there aren't going to be very many more on Curtis and Dakota. And clearly they're needing the height because the lots are not as deep. Those on Primrose are not getting anywhere near it, which means we could reduce the parallel slope to encourage future development to be consistent with what's been approved and what's being developed. HARC didn't have any very strong feelings about this, and we're happy to kind of leave it as it is. Doesn't seem to be a significant driver of the mass and scale on most of these hillside lots, the newer lots.
Let's leave it alone.
Agreed.
Other people are doing this?
Agree.
I think we're doing enough, and if there's not a problem, we don't need to.
Right.
Agreed.
And if everything's been approved for Gregory, Dakota, Pandora and Curtis, that's, you know,
We've already had the visual
yeah,
intrusion.
we already have some very tall buildings
Yeah.
there.
So I'm gonna talk about design guidelines in a second, and I think that this could be addressed in the guidelines a little bit better. And talk more about neighborhood context, because the context is being established in Hillside Developing 2 and is already established on Curtis and Dakota and Gregory. So, okay, leave it.
And complete scrapes and rebuilds
Yeah.
are, they're gonna be coming on Curtis and Gregory too.
Okay,
So we're gonna shrink them.
so the next goal was to retain the look and feel of Telluride's traditional mass and scale on the hillsides. These are some of the examples of what Park has seen lately. So when I came to you last time, we had several different possible approaches of revising our dimensional requirements for these zone districts. Nothing was getting us to where we wanted to go. So we stepped back and decided maybe it's not a land use code issue, it's probably a design guidelines issue. So what we are recommending is that we add a new section to the design guidelines special standards to address those concerns of stepping back up the hillside. The facade width has come up a few times in projects like these, also on larger hillside lots or wider hillside lots. We could address issues like regrading the hillside or restoring the natural slope, which has become an issue on some of these lots where they want to terrace and make yards. And we don't have things right now to address those in the design guidelines. Right now, we do have 2 treatment areas that do address the hillsides. We have the transitional hillside and the developing hillside. They tend to be more lenient than all of the other treatment areas in town because they're outside of the historic district. It's setting kind of a new design aesthetic. They allow, you know, maybe more windows or different orientation of the building depending on the topography, but they don't get to these specific concerns that we're seeing now as these buildings start popping up. So the idea would be to add a new, probably short section, but to the special standards in the design guidelines, which right now contain the alley, shed, and secondary structure standards, the exterior and lighting, site lighting standards, and the sign standards. And the reason why I would propose to put them in the special standards is because we could create a new chapter called steep lots or whatever, but these special standards apply to all of the treatment areas. It's an extra overlay that we can apply over developing hillside, over transitional hillside, over residential, over historic residential, wherever we see a steep lot, those apply. And we can specifically encourage stepping back up the lot, respecting the topography, etc.
What did Hark think?
Loved it.
We do too. All right.
That's great.
Good. Yeah, it doesn't all have to be in the code. In fact, it shouldn't all be in the code.
Trying to imagine situations with that. That all sounds great. Where figuring out if you're in the 25% or you're 24.5, you round up, whether you round down, whether you want to be in this new overlay or special standards language, or you want to avoid it. But imagining surveyors or people are going to need to look at this to make that determination, or if you've thought about how to simplify that, if that's a concern.
Well, clearly the incentive to be in an over 25% is the extra basements that you kind of do get and the extra underground space. I mean, you're going to start at the lowest point of your lot and go up, but but you've got more underground potential there than you do on a less than 25% lot, the way ever defining them right now. So that's kind of the quid pro quo as you're trading. Do you want to do the new steep lot design guidelines and have more underground space, or do you want to,
Not.
decide your lot is 23% and you're going to have one level of basement only?
I mean, like any, right, like, there are gonna be people who are trying to game it one way or the other. We'll just have to see how that works out.
That's what the guidelines are for, yeah.
I think that's, there's some balance there, I guess, is what I'm thinking between the two working together.
Angela.
Yeah, two questions or comments here. I think if it makes sense to the way you administer the guidelines, to put it in this kind of a fashion, then I think we're all on board with that. Because it's the administration of it that it gets complicated.
That's right, application.
Back to the, and I don't know how to address this, it's just a general steep lot question. Is there a way? I think one of our initial issues is that they're digging so far in. Is there a way to make the building shallower?
But
So
but
that's
then
not
it's
done.
gonna be more in our face. I
That's
mean,
right, and then so we take off that top level and it becomes smaller volume of a house.
I know.
I don't know, I'm just saying, that's the other part that we haven't really addressed with what we're trying to manipulate here, and I understand that that brings everything forward and that brings it in more in your face if we allow that same square footage. So you see what I'm saying? It's the other part of the puzzle.
But you could limit the total square footage to something where it's not, so they're not digging
And
75 feet deep.
We
and-
kind of went down that path and didn't get clear consensus on that. It was, yes, we want that, and no, we don't.
Yeah.
Thought I have, I think you guys see this and have a better sense than I do. My limited understanding, HD2, you've in cases got 3 enclosed parking spaces you have to accommodate. There's no sort of front setback to park a car in. And so these garages often are responding to the requirements in the code. And there's constructability about going in deeper in these steep conditions and doing a single tall wall at the back instead of less excavation and multiple floors as it kind of terraces up.
Yeah.
Just want to say parking and accommodating vehicles is often a big chunk that just goes up in steep lots.
So I think we agree. that
Architect special.
Guidelines are good. Guidelines are good. We want them to address it. Special standard is good.
Yeah, I was just wondering we got some in the historic residential. Some developing hillside that are east-west oriented,
Yes.
Wider rather than,
right? And does,
yeah.
how does steep apply to
Wide.
wide rather than deep?
Wide and shallow. I think
Wide,
is-
yeah.
Shallow.
I'm thinking
The
of
second
some of the
picture
ones up.
that you had
Yeah.
up there,
Tell me
Well-
when to stop.
that one,
This one?
is that what you're?
Well,
It could be, but I'm just wanting to make sure that we don't restrict that to only the north-south oriented lots. That the east-west oriented lots don't get a free pass and have, the wide facade kind of thing.
so these both happen to be north-south oriented, but
Yeah,
the addition of a new section in the special standards would address steep lots regardless of their orientation. And I think one of the concerns Harp brought up when we were discussing these projects after they were approved is really a concern about even stepping down to the sides, not just stepping down the hillside, but stepping down to the neighbors or stepping down to the side
So not
yards.
just big cliff on the side.
Yeah, and we can address that in the guidelines. Does that get to your?
I would just also just say within the, this is not necessarily what we're talking about, but the amount of windows that some of these up on the hillside have, I mean, the light coming from those is much greater than the light from, I mean, it,
Yeah, that top one, for example.
Well, this one was not approved. It was a work
Yeah.
session, but I guess the argument is that when most of the houses below grade, your only glazing is on the front.
Yeah.
That's the only place light is spilling, and unfortunately it's spilling towards town because that's what front's gonna be towards town. The overall window to wall ratio, which we look at on this one, is excessive. This one below, had reduced the glazing on this side probably by 50%. This one is an example of not really being built into the hillside. It's more freestanding. So the east and west sides are more exposed and there's more glazing. This one is on the downhill side of Tomboy Road, which is a special condition in itself. And also affects the parallel slope method. Because there's a garage on Tomboy Road, it significantly affects their height calculation. Because it stands above the road. So there are unique examples in every area.
That's Hart's job.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, Peter, did you want to have a
We need
comment?
to help.
I didn't have a comment here, just had another.
We're ready to go on.
Okay, let's move on. So the final goal, which really came out of our P&Z work session last month, was to limit the environmental impacts of demolition and new construction. And this is a big one. I think everyone takes this seriously. The town takes it seriously and has really addressed a lot of this in the climate action plan. I visited with Zoe Donal, who was hired with the intent of having her implement the climate action plan. So after visiting with her about kind of the goals of this climate action plan, which has been adopted, a lot of the concerns that came out of our conversation last month are addressed in this. And I guess our recommendation at this point is to not create parallel tracks, but to really support the implementation of the climate action plan, which talk about adopting an all-electric building code, retrofitting existing buildings with energy conserving retrofits to reduce embodied emissions from construction, to require energy efficiency upgrades and incentivize other technology. So through our conversation, these are some of the things that are on the horizon. They're not imminent near term, but I think Zoe is willing to work with us to and our boards to solidify how the town wants to implement these goals. And these are some of the suggestions that have also come out of the action or the climate action plan. Encouraging or requiring contractors to use low carbon materials, to reduce embodied carbon in construction, to require electric equipment, to revise the green building code, to require deconstruction instead of demolition. All of these are big tasks in themselves, and I think beyond the scope of what we're trying to accomplish right now. And so our recommendation is to support the implementation of the climate action plan and any other related code amendments that might be ordinances that don't live in the land use code, but maybe live in the municipal.
Wait, just one sec. So the idea would be that how do these ordinances come to be in this vision?
So some of these will be amendments to the building code or the green building code, and Ron could speak to that a little more specifically. And some will be probably standalone ordinances that are introduced and live in the municipal code or perhaps in the land use code. But you know, establishing a carbon tax on demolitions, that's probably related to the land use code, but maybe a separate, entirely separate ordinance.
I'm also on the ecology commission. And not everything on your list, one slide back, is on the list of what's supposed to be happening fast. So I'm a little concerned about that. I also think that we really didn't take the construction mitigation plan and match it to our environmental action plan. And I think that needs to happen soon. Not that it's your job, either one is Zoe's job and town council's job, maybe in a way, or ecology and town council, but that needs to happen sooner than later. And then I had a really frustrating moment when I can usually make all the trucks in my neighborhood not idle, but there was a guy on Pine Street who was in his it's clean diesel, it's new, it can idle, it's certified in California. And I'm like, well, we're not in California, we're in Colorado, and you can't idle any vehicle, doesn't matter. But I also knew if I had to be someplace on time, I couldn't stand there and call code enforcement and wait a half an hour for them to show up. So I think there needs to be a better level of enforcement, even if it's from the building department, because they are going to those jobs, and we never get to try to get code enforcement at the jobs is very, very difficult because they have too many other things they're also code enforcing. So,
Yeah, I would say your point applies to all enforcement.
yeah, no, it does. But I would love to see a new revision of the construction mitigation plan, because I think there's some pretty big holes in it, more than this, but some of the ones to do with the climate action plan.
Yeah.
It's never been matched up. It's always been, this is over here, this
Right.
is over here, and
And
whether we have to make everybody pull a building permit, read it,
yeah,
and sign off that they've read it.
I guess that's the direction.
Yeah, but we didn't know
Yeah,
until you made us remeasure everything.
yeah,
Yeah.
Really?
yeah.
I think you just made the point, Kathy, is that everything is kind of all over, and the idea is maybe we can get this all kind of in one place and work within the plan that we've already adopted to implement some of these things. And I want to say I'm not trying to deflect this because it is very important, but I also don't want to work on a parallel path with something that's also being done.
Yeah. No, I think
Within the
Yeah,
town
no, we've got to
administration.
go through the suspension.
Are you all
items.
comfortable with that?
If we can come back to this pretty soon.
Yes.
Yes.
As long as you keep us, informed on how this matchup is.
Yeah,
okay.
and to be honest, our discussion is what prompted me to learn more about it. I hadn't followed it closely. But it does directly impact what we do every day. And so
Sure.
Zoe and Ron and I will talk about how we can start implementing these, and she's more than willing to go forward with it.
She's always staffed at ecology as well.
Yeah, well, because of the connection on the environment.
So I guess, our ask to you is to help support this movement forward of these issues.
Yeah, at least my concern was the climate action plan is just that. There are no teeth.
Well, yeah, that's why we want to know, how does it become an ordinance?
Yeah.
Right.
But we now have someone whose job it is to figure out how to do that.
Right, so you don't have to do it too.
That ends my presentation. Do you have any
Great.
questions or anything else
Yes.
you would like to
Yes.
say?
Are you gonna come back to us with some language?
Next steps. This is the second of 2 work sessions on this subject with planning and zoning. The next stop will be a work session with town council on July 11th. Hopefully, we will get council support on the direction that we're moving on these issues. If they give us the thumbs up, we will come back to you in July with a review and recommendation. We'll have specific code language for you to look at and review. Once Hark and P&Z provide the review and recommendations, we will go back to town council for a first reading of the ordinance.
We're still on track with that. schedule.
Still on track. Yes, that's our goal.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I also want to say, this has been a very staff intensive process. And I really, really appreciate all of the my coworkers' time and thought that's been put into these recommendations. 'Cause-
Well, we understand it.
Yay.
Staff, yes, staff, right.
But
Yeah.
thank you also for your input.
No, you all are doing,
doing good.
everybody planning and Hark is doing an amazing job on this. Really
Great. Yeah, hope to get it done by
Thank
the
you for
deadline.
taking it up.
Discuss our.
So does that conclude your
It
presentation?
concludes my presentation unless there are any other questions.
I think we're ready. Do we need a break or are we ready to go on to Ron?
I was gonna ask you that.
I think we can go on to Ron.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
so now we have work session 2, land use code amendments. A work session to discuss potential amendments to the land use code pertaining to lot line vacations and Telluride question 300, which was passed by the Telluride elected in 2015. To now allow, to not, I think it should say, allow the vacation of lot lines in order to combine 2 or more land use code compliant lots into one, except in specific situations per LUC section 5-201C. Staff member is Ron.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. So this was discussed last night as well with the Hark Commissioners. And as I go through this, I'll try to clarify what their responses were and their concerns as best I can. What's happened to that ballot box?
It's overlapped with a tree.
It's disappearing.
Shredded.
So again, just quickly, I'll kind of refresh your memory of what ballot 300 states. Land use code be amended to not allow the vacation of lot lines in order to combine 2 or more land use compliant lots into one. Example, the creation of larger than average lots for large homes with the following exceptions. For purposes of commercial development, in cases where existing homes or buildings straddle lot lines, housekeeping, where both Hark and P&Z vote by extraordinary majority to allow the vacation of lot lines for an exceptional public benefit or on-site affordable housing. And 4, unless required by the underlying zoning of the Hillside Developing 2 zone district. So the objective again is to clarify the language and codify it. Town council can actually repeal and amend any ballot language within 6 months or after 6 months. This has been in place 7 years, as you know. We have never codified it, but we do implement it. Some of the issues, ballot 300 that we summarized at the last meeting that were addressed in the whereas language. Larger lot sizes to build homes out of scale with the community. Most larger homes are empty for majority of the year. Loss of affordable housing and demolition of smaller homes. At the last meeting, we presented you a question as to what this is intended or for what kinds of development this is intended. And the consensus was that the intent was to address the single family and 2-family homes, not the multifamily or the condominium type developments. And then the focus, originally we were looking at the 3 residential zoning districts, Hillside transitional residential, historic residential, and then based on your comments, we added residential, commercial, and accommodations 1 as a focus for for these changes. So the land use code is a tool. And there are ways that we can address the issues that were identified through the ballot measure. And they include lot line vacations, demolitions, maximum lot sizes, and additions. So I'll go through each of the proposals. Lot line vacations, what we're proposing to do is add a note to the use tables in the HT or the HTR, HR, RC, and A1 zoning districts. You know, this is typically the way we accomplish specific requirements based on the land uses. So we'll put a note at the bottom of the land use table. And the note will read something to this effect. We may need to modify the language some more, but this is where we've gone since our last meeting. And I'll just read it. A lot designated for a 1 or 2 family unit may be consolidated or aggregated with 1 or more adjoining lots. And before I go on, consolidated or aggregated is the language that's in the land use code right now. So that's why we're using that language. And we're not saying land use code compliant adjoining. No.
No, because you see.
Yep. Yeah. Good. Yeah, to eliminate non-conforming lots as per section 4-101, or to eliminate pre-existing building encroachments across lot lines. And we include the language that's in ballot 300, including open decks, porches, roof eaves, and stoops, or by means of a planned unit development. And that's language that's trying to address the issue. If you are going to do this, that you have to provide a public benefit. And then lastly, however, unless approved through the PUD process, no consolidation or aggregation of lots may occur if 1 or more lot lines may be adjusted or repositioned to eliminate building encroachments or other nonconformities without resulting in any other nonconformities.
So that applies to A and B. The however language.
Yes, the how.
Yeah.
So if, for example, you know, this is an actual lot line adjustment that occurred, and it required a variance, but yeah, just for purposes of an example, it did extend across an existing building, but the solution was to adjust the lot line. And their land use compliant lots, except for the width of the one of the lots. But if there are examples where an adjustment can be made, then the code would prevent a lot line vacation.
That should be the first choice.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wait, are we at a point we can ask questions, Ron?
I'm sorry.
Should we ask questions now or should we wait?
Yeah, go ahead, anytime.
I know creating odd lots has always been a thing we were not allowed or discouraged or to try again. I think that the language you used, if it can be replatted or adjusted otherwise, there are a lot of odd geometries, much that's not that clean looking even, but some weird lots that are going to get created, Ron, and by the circumstance being, yeah, you can create these things, but they're going to be really screwed up.
Well,
And that's where you're going to be like, well, it says
if they're
we can do it,
if
then
they're
that gives you a
compliant,
carte blanche to create a screwy lot, or 2 screwy lots, to be
maybe,
fair.
maybe,
Well, they can't be narrower than 25 feet unless there's a variance.
yeah.
The one he showed us also had to go through a variance process.
That looks comparatively clean to a lot of the ones where you're going to adjust around a historic eave or some jog and at angle, and I'm sort of thinking that you're going to end up with a new problem, which is we got weird lots now.
Well-
that are getting mapped all over the place, and that's the new normal.
Well, how could we correct it? What would we say about adjustments? That
Big
they-
sawzall.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, these are historic properties and there's there's a lot of 1970s stuff that's kind of screwed up.
Say a percentage, that Ron knows it probably exactly what percentage of
Let's
lot
see.
line vacations were driven by non-historic, non-conforming, like buildings over lot lines
In
were
the-
not historic.
Oh,
Oh, I can see
Recently,
lots you with that.
Most of them, I mean,
A lot of
Yeah.
several.
lots.
but, yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but, you know, some of these things are not going to be traditional. But they address the issue and I guess it's one negative versus another, but
So the other lot, the lot, both lots would have to allow for construction of a dwelling.
yes. It'd have to
That's
be
what
land use
conforming lot
compliant,
means, Yeah.
yes.
So,
and in this case, they can adjust the lot line. They can't eliminate it. Make that all one lot and then.
tear down.
They could
Tear
have,
down,
that
so-
the lot could be slightly different place, yes. I
Yeah.
see.
Yeah, that's the intent of the language.
Mhm.
Is there a necessity, Peter, to mention that this is intended to use stated intentions? Intended to correct historic issues of some sort? Is that what you're implying?
I'm just, I don't know, it's going in a different direction than prior.
Approvals?
Yeah, and then like talking about lot lines is like, you will behave, you will clean this up if anything, or not increase nonconformities, but.
Yeah.
These are gonna be ongoing permanent situations when you move lot lines that are gonna be like, how the heck did this happen? And this is kind of a mess in a way for how you then gotta respond to these strange things as opposed to something that is as clean as that. That's not,
And I think
It
most
wasn't a
of
clean
them,
discussion, but.
yeah.
I think most of them will
To
be
get there.
cleaner than, I mean, I don't think there's gonna be a lot of them out there that's gonna. But I understand what you're saying. Before I move on, are you in agreement with this language or
How did Hark feel about it?
Park supported it?
Okay.
No changes. One of the few things that.
Okay.
Yeah,
So if you're okay with that,
I think it's.
Just concerned about unintended
Maybe
consequences.
it's one of those things we review in 2 years.
Yeah. Big
Right.
ones.
Yeah.
Uh,
So moving to demolitions. And I just have a photograph of an example of a demolition in the new construction that replaced it, but there's lots of them out there. Division 3 of the Land Use Code addresses demolitions. Section 7-306 specifically addresses the standards for review of demolitions, and I think that's where we're going to insert the language. For any development that includes a demolition, you have to agree that you're going to submit a redevelopment plan for approval. There's criteria under section 7-306A9. It talks about the architectural character, the historical integrity, the character of the immediate area. So we're adding the language in yellow to address the concerns I think that have been recent. And I'll just read it. The applicant for the demolition of a 1 or 2 family residence has agreed to redevelop the originating site pursuant to an approved redevelopment plan that includes items under section 7-306A9, that's in white, and that details how the replacement structure will closely represent the size and dimensions of the demolished residence, not including any nonconformities as per section 4-102. This standard may be waived by Hark if an employee dwelling unit or affordable housing unit is also constructed on site and the redevelopment otherwise meets all design review standards and dimensional limitations.
Okay,
So-
so I have a question. Are we not, are we double acting? Are we doing two things that when we only need one? So if we have a lot line thing, then the problem that we wanted to address where small houses straddles the line is knocked down, the large houses built up by law. A very large house. If we now are gonna mostly have two smaller lots, which will result in two smaller houses, do we need this as well?
The picture he showed just prior to this, up on the hillside, is a.
So you can't, there's small houses on big lots already.
Yeah.
Okay, Peter.
I go back to this. This was brought up at the retreat initially. If this was kind of something that's sort of percolated to the surface among other things to consider or just to bring up.
Well, no, I mean, the intent of the ballot language was the concern of the ballot language was that larger homes were replacing smaller homes, and that it specifically stated demolition of smaller homes and the loss of affordable rental housing. So I think that the current language of ballot 300 doesn't really address demolitions as we're proposing this, but I think we're trying to address the issue that was identified with the ballot.
Can I ask a follow?
Wait. Go
Sorry,
ahead.
follow-up question to that,
Sure.
just so I'm tracking. So is this will this sort of clause about demolitions respecting sort of the mass and scale, or as a part of a redevelopment review, sort of nodding to what was there for existing structures that aren't involved in a question 300, or like any demolition, Ron, or is it
Yeah,
only
that's-
demolitions that are happening related to a would you
it's
call it
any-
a re-aggregation or?
Any demolition, and that was, and
That's my
I'll
question.
just last night's meeting, that was a major concern of
Yeah.
our of the 6 members. Are there
It
6
was
there?
6 to
So
1.
6 to 1, 6. One member supported this, but 6 of the HARC members were very concerned.
They were adamantly against it.
Then what?
Wait, Todd, who has a comment?
We touched on it last time too, that the last sentence here, the standard may be waived if an EDU or AHU is also constructed and is occupied. I mean, oh,
So that would be covered under current affordable housing guidelines.
but not if it's an EDU.
Yes, it would be.
EDUs aren't.
The new EDU.
Yeah, if you build it now, you don't get away with what we used to get away with. You just get away with it. Angela, you have a comment?
I was just gonna say, what was their major objection?
I think the word overreach was used.
Did they not understand the intention?
They didn't think it was directly related to the ballot question 300 language.
Now, they had less concerns if we had language in here that tied it specifically to lot line vacation.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I have submitted demolition applications on non-historic buildings that we were glad to see go in a variety of locations in town. And it's scary to me to imagine all of a sudden that we're going to any demolition, putting it a status that, well, we're gonna rebuild it and we need to revere it. That isn't something I see making any sense either. So I think
Well-
I understand the intent, which is you're trying to, there's maybe a prevailing concern about mass and scale or the amount of development. And that this is sort of saying, okay, well, we're gonna try and tamp that down a little bit or control it how we can, and this is a way to do that. But I don't think it was talked about at the retreat. This does feel like an expansion, and I think in a review of some of the things being demolished and replaced, trying to replicate them doesn't make a whole lot of sense, or it's not gonna
Yeah.
necessarily result in a.
Right, well, I think I agree with Peter on this one. I think that this does not directly get at what we're trying to get at. So we're trying to get at two things. One is 300 says, don't combine lots for the purpose of
Building a mega house.
knocking down little house and building a bigger house. So we have what we just talked about, where we have to, in most cases, try to keep smaller lots. I think that will go a long way towards addressing specifically what 300 was designed to address, which is combining lot lines. This one, it's like, why don't, if we're concerned about things getting built that seem too big for their lot or out of scale with whatever the context is, we should just straight up reduce the floor area ratios that are allowed. You know, just tell people they have to build smaller houses rather than it being constrained by the luck of the draw, whether you happen to have a house on this lot or not. So I would say that if we're prepared to say, no, you can't build whatever the maximum lot is now, 4,000, it has to be 3,500, fine. Maybe that's a more cleaner way to go, but this seems kind of arbitrary to me, because it's like, well, if you happen to buy a lot that has a crappy old house on it, you have to keep it that way. But if you have a lot that has a very large crappy old house, you're great, you lucked out.
Well, and I think we're also trying to incentivize, I don't know if that's a word, the affordable housing. And you can still you can build to the max, but you have to provide an affordable housing.
Well, I think we should address that more directly, upzone,
Yeah.
you know, let's upzone. Let's require
Okay,
if you have a house over a certain amount of size.
No,
It
it just,
actually doesn't say to replicate it. Just says represent size and dimension.
Well,
yeah, we tried to,
Back to your slides, there's some goofy looking things that you're like, what? You want me to rebuild that?
well, I mean, again, I mean, the intent was to preserve the historic character, and I know, and the intent of what ballot measure was all about.
But for the most.
Because we're gonna still, we will still have the lot line vacations that straddle lot lines. I mean, that's still gonna be in place.
well, no, because many of the times we'll be able to draw around the house.
Not many, maybe some, but no, there may not
Actually, I have
be,
no idea.
yeah.
The consent of the neighboring property owner to do that too, right?
Yeah.
And lot line is shared by two owners
Well,
Keep buying or have a friendly neighbor.
in most cases.
most,
Well, if your house is already sticking into their lot, they already have a problem with your lot. Your house is already in their yard.
so I guess what I'm saying is, we haven't taken that away. I mean, that's still gonna happen. We're still gonna get applications for a lot line vacation for something that crosses and extends across a building, and it's gonna be demolished, and it's gonna be built with a much larger home. We're still gonna have that with the changes that we're recommending, unless we have something like this in the language.
Well, at least then this should be not all demolition. Why is it not confined to lot line vacations then?
I mean, that's something we can, I think, Hart was a little less concerned about it if it did tie directly to the lot line vacation. They still had concerns on it. I mean,
Other people?
I just can remember over the decades, a lot of things that got HARC approvals and then they never got built. And in some cases, the things have been demolished, lot lines. Some of this was pre-300. And so we ended up, so I don't think there should be any expectation that just because you have a HARC approval, that means you'll pull a building permit and buy it. I think when you pull your building permit is when you get to do your demo. Because at that point, you've spent so much money that you must be going forward. Because otherwise, people are just going to get a HARC approval and then mark, demo something and mark the lot up a couple 100,000 or million and resell it. And that's not our goal.
Wait, Kathy, I don't understand how your concerns relate to this.
Well, it's more like it's like you have an approved redevelopment plan. I would want it to say that you have a building permit matching approved redevelopment plan before you can do the demolition.
Ah,
You know, the
Okay.
timing of the
Okay.
demolition,
mhm.
because if the whole Hark approval is gonna expire, the demolition should expire with it. And that goes in the old section and in the new part as well.
But
You're
you're okay
describing the
with
way it
the-
works now, which is you don't get a demolition permit until you've been issued your building permit.
Well, I have neighbors that are special and they do.
Ooh.
Yeah. I have several neighbors who play by the rules. One right now that somehow
Forgets.
he has one right now. And he probably will never build that house. He has a demolition permit for structure, and I bet the house that he has designed on it, the lot's for sale. He has no intention of buying a permit.
Sorry about that. No.
That's an enforcement problem.
That's an enforcement problem, but no one wants to listen. They don't seem to understand that. Because I always thought what you thought, Peter, that you could not do your demolition until you had bought the building permit. And I just think all of our language needs to stay this, because this says an approved redevelopment plan. That's, you know, that's simple. That's relatively cheap. You know.
Although we
compared-
do have language in the code that,
What?
we do have language in the code that doesn't allow you to demolish if you're not in the process of getting a building permit.
But I think Kathy, your concern goes to how this language works in practice, and I think
Yeah.
we were starting to talk about, should we have this at all?
Yeah,
Do we like it at all? And so if anybody else has any thoughts about that, I've already talked about it.
Is it worth revising, or should we just,
Can it?
My only other thought related to this, to me, it feels a little arbitrary. It's like that you're, it seems arbitrary to pick on demolitions now when it's been done quite differently for a while. I'm wondering if in the design guidelines, there isn't something that ties into, if this is part of a demolition permit type application during a HARC review, that there needs to be maybe some inclusion of at least asking the question, was the structure, was the mass and scale, were there pleasant things about it that should inform the HARC process
It's part
of,
of the demolition criteria in the land use code. And that
Which is
is,
rigorous,
that it
right.
is compatible with the historic integrity and architectural character of the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And so that's pretty,
yeah, so it's kind of already
Subjective.
it's been addressed in the code and would you say, if you were to elaborate on that you feel like that's been applied correctly or in scattershot ways?
no comment.
Okay, all right, that's all.
Kathy?
I think if we want to force employee dwelling units or AHUs, we should do it in a different way by either going for, you have to build a duplex. You can never build another single family house in this town in any zone district. I mean, this probably, you know, won't pass town council, but other communities, surprising communities have done this. Or that if you have a lot, and we've flirted with this in the past, if you have a lot that's 5,000 square feet or greater, you have to build a second unit, again, whether it's deed restricted or not. But I mean, I think we just need to go at it directly and make a big decision and do it. And I don't see how this helps. And I think it's just, you know, giving them a way to demolish something and then flip the lot for a lot of money.
Other thoughts about this one?
I just wonder if this is P&Z, it's a bigger conversation in a lot of ways, whether it's one board, two boards, council.
Let's not do it.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, Okay, so we don't like this one. Mara.
Yeah, thank you.
So I think the origin
Strike
of
two.
what
Sean was trying to address was our comments about the changes that we're seeing in a block by block method. I don't know that this is getting us there, but I understand what he's trying to describe.
Yeah.
And the incentive that you're trying to build into it, which I think we would like to address, but maybe this particular provision is not getting us. there.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should talk. about-
Based on
Should we
what we've
do
done
like
before.
requiring larger lots to have a second unit? Should we do upzoning to allow everybody to have a second unit? Should we restrict the size of major dwellings more than we have now? I mean, we can talk about those things. That's a big conversation. We're not ready to do that right here. But I think that's going at what we're really talking about in a more direct way.
Okay, we can. I mean, just one more comment. Two of the things that were identified as issues were loss of affordable housing and
Right.
losing
Right.
larger
We're
homes.
trying to find the
smaller,
best
or
mechanism to get there,
Losing smaller.
I
homes,
think, yeah.
Okay. That one then is strike two.
Sorry, but
Like strike three.
Yeah.
that's also the way Hark feels, right?
Yeah, didn't like it.
Yes.
Yeah, so, so let's get things we can get, and we can come back to the hard stuff later after the suspension time.
Well, and some stuff that's in our bailiwick and really is not like this cross hark thing. It's like, how big is a house? This us.
Yeah.
Decide that. Or we can.
So-
To give us input.
Lot size maximums.
So Peter, did you want to say something?
I just want to sort of random thing on in this vein of how do you, the loss of local housing or affordable housing, which isn't as much a how to encourage it or require it in different ways within the new construction or redevelopment, but one in just existing homes and residences, and how to incentivize someone to rent to locals. And are there other methods that are short of actually asking them or them deed restricting forever a portion of their property, but to rent to locals with a tax break or some incentive that just is like, if you can prove somebody that complies with the deed restriction, you're renting to them, here's X off your taxes per person or something like that. And then you're going to say, well, okay, now you put that number right, and you'll have people taking advantage of it that don't get into Hark and land use code. Sorry.
We can discuss that at our next work session.
Yeah, that's
Because that's I agree.
a great approach.
That's a great approach. You're crossing taxing jurisdiction boundaries.
Let's go on.
So maximum lot size, right now, the only residential zone or residential maximum lot size is 5,875 square feet in the AC1 that can be increased with the PUD. At the last meeting, we talked about imposing a new maximum, and I think it was Kathy that suggested that we do the 6,250 square feet.
It comes from our largest but rare lot size of 25 feet by 125 feet. So if you take two of those lots, that's that number, unless I did my math wrong.
You're right.
So we applied, or we looked at it and we applied it to how it would affect the floor areas, maximum floor areas. And what this chart shows you is that at the very top, 2,500 square foot lot would produce would require no more than 1,825 square feet floor area. And then there's a bonus beyond or below that for larger lots if you're providing affordable housing. So the very bottom, in order to achieve 4,000 square feet, you'd have to build 8,590, a lot of 8,596 square feet. That's the way our land use code includes the table. or identifies the maximums. So if we reduce that to 6,250 square feet, that would reduce the maximum floor area to 2,968 square feet, and with a bonus, 3,368 square feet. And this is in just the hillside transitional and the residential zoning. So if you're reducing the maximum size of the lot, you're also reducing what the floor area or what you can achieve in the floor area.
And I think we just all have to remember that every kind of lot we're talking about does get one basement at least.
Yeah.
So,
Which is
which is not in this number. So when we're limiting them,
That's right.
there could easily be, 1,000 to.
Right.
They're, 1,600 square feet below grade for that larger number.
Or in
60.
the hillside transitional.
Yeah, if you're in the hillside transitional, you might get 2 basements or something.
Yeah.
So, I mean. In many zone districts, you'll still be able to achieve a 4,000 square foot house.
Total, yeah,
Yeah, total.
or more.
Yeah,
So if you reduce it, it doesn't really have an effect on the maximum floor area for accessory because between 5,000 and 6,000, you're going to be at the 950 maximum. In the historic residential zoning, it would, if you reduce it, it would reduce the floor area to 2,918, 3,318 with the bonus. And the accessory building would be reduced to 795 square feet, or about 100 square feet. The accommodations one, again, we have a maximum 5,875. We're not recommending any changes to that. The residential commercial, we just imposed the new 4,000 square foot maximum floor area for residential. It's a little bit different kind of zoning district, so we're not recommending any maximum size lot in the residential commercial. So if we included new language, it would read something similar to this. It would apply only to the hillside transitional residential and historic residential. Maximum lot area for 1 and 2 family dwellings shall be 6,250 square feet. However, such maximum may be increased pursuant to Article 6, Division 3, Planned Unit Development. I guess we kind of like the idea that there is the opportunity, if they want to provide public benefit, they can go above the maximum. Before I go on, how does everyone feel about it?
Having more comments?
So this is kind of tied to 300 in that it's sort of getting to the intent, right? Of
Yeah.
not bigger houses on
Yeah.
bigger lots.
Yes.
Out of curiosity, in those zones, how many lots would you guess, or have you contemplated looking at the lot maps, would be created non-conforming with this maximum?
And are you saying non-conforming because they're larger?
They're bigger than 6,250 square feet.
Not very many, but I don't have a number for you. And we would keep the same formula in there that we have now that would allow them to go up to the 4,000 square feet if they are a non-conforming lot.
And in the tables you ran through, as you described them in the different zones, was it, as I understood it, only impacting, it substantially impacted the allowable from the 4,000 to roughly 1,000, whatever below, but it wasn't impacting the 5,000 to 6,000, the 4,000 to 5,000
No.
floor area
No,
calculation.
these are the existing, and they wouldn't change,
Just the bottom at the maximum.
just the
Okay.
maximum.
I understand.
I think we're good with this one, Ron.
Okay, good.
And Park was.
Mark was good with it too.
Oh, that's good to know.
The final issue. Additions. And you expressed your concern at the last meeting. And I'll just read the language that we were suggesting. Additions to any single family or duplex residence, not including basements, may not exceed the floor area or building heights of the existing building, not including basements except through the PUD process. Our recommendation is and this is also based on input from HARC. HARC had some concerns. They thought that the existing design guidelines address this, and I think they kind of thought it was an overreach as well. But they agreed it's something that we could look at in the future. I think at the last meeting, you talked about including it as part of the comprehensive plan. Maybe if we look at sub areas in the town, and determine what might be appropriate based on existing patterns. So unless you want to pursue this, this is another one that we'll probably not go forward with.
I think we do need the study, so maybe doing it, it'll be a big sub area plan because it's many districts, but
Right.
And there could be a great slideshow of all the ones that happen, shouldn't have.
The tail wagging the dog.
Yeah,
I think it's an issue that we should explore in the long term, at least.
Well, and
Going to increase the value of every big structure in town.
yeah, but if, if people are concerned about it, we do have guidelines that just may not be being followed.
and I just want to clarify that if there's commercial development, like you are exempt from 300 because it's been played both ways in the last 7 years. And that's one of the biggest issues, is to tie up some commercial project that often includes housing on site and everything with this 300 issue. And it's like,
Well, that's why we took out multifamily.
yeah,
So
So-
that won't happen. That'll go away.
make sure, because
You removed it in the Main Street and warehouse. Like it's not, doesn't apply there, correct?
Not any commercial accommodations to.
Accommodations got some commercial aspect to it.
Accommodations too is more, is not as, in fact, it doesn't allow one family and two family dwellings. Accommodations one does.
But commercial as well, correct?
Commercial only in, and we went over this at the last meeting, only in the Bachman Village as non-conforming. Otherwise, it's not permitted in commercial zone.
All right, so we agree with Hark. Good,
So that's it.
that's it. So next steps on this one?
Same as what John was saying, it'll go in front of town council on July 11 for their consideration, a work session. At least we're scheduling it. We're trying to schedule it for that. And then it'll go back to Hark and then come back to you in July. And then hopefully we can wrap it up by the end of August.
Awesome,
great.
great, thank you, Ron. Is there any board and staff discussion of some other matter? Actually, first, Piper, I should ask, is there any public comment on any of this work session stuff?
There's no public.
Okay. We all went home.
There's no.
Sorry, Kathy, you had some.
I'm
discussion.
confused. I thought that a project to get a CO or to be complete had to have landscaping. There's a bunch of wonderful, I love them, new houses on Willow, North Willow. And the landscaping is not there.
Projects can, excuse me, contractors can bond for landscaping when they are seeking a CO, typically during winter, and they
Right.
can install the landscaping. So we hold a bond until the landscaping is complete, and then we release the bond.
Okay. And I'm just curious because I've seen no
Is there
progress.
any time limit on which they? have,
There's
like,
not
2 years
typically a
later?
time limit, but I know that it's hard to get a landscaper to do the work, right?
Yeah, right now.
Or if you can get a landscaper, they can't get plans.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Well, I mean, there's a lot of work that has to happen before they get to the planning stage, but.
But we,
I
we
guess
have the money to do it in case they don't do it.
they'll do it. Okay, all right. All right, I just wondered what sense.
And if you want to keep an eye on it, and let me know if you think it's been too long.
I know they both
So-
finished in the winter. It's just kind of,
It's
thought
still
they'd be
kind of
jumpy.
spring.
yeah, I thought they would get right on it.
There's been a couple.
So
ones.
given-
The summer started yesterday.
That's a pretty typical.
Yeah.
For a municipality to use. The problem comes, I think, on Willow in particular is erosion. And I don't think they probably have any erosion control wattles or.
Oh, yeah, no, the red
Yeah.
when it was raining.
So that is.
That's part of the construction mitigation.
I think invasive weeds are an issue that, you know.
Yeah.
That,
So,
that they're taking over. No, I don't mean dandelions, nothing that simple. I mean, or stuff.
so if that is something that code enforcement should check,
Wow.
because that ends up, it's a hazard to everybody downstream, and it also is a hazard to the structure. But it's just construction.
The gutter system is designed to bring the Tomboy Road runoff, which is red when it rains or snow melts, down Oak Street to the south side of Columbia, along Columbia to the Alder intake.
Yes.
So when you see the north side of Columbia gutters, or you see some of the other gutters flowing red, something's wrong. Because all the red was supposed to come down Tomboy Road, come down Oak Street, get in
Right.
Columbia on the south side and then
Instead of the
go
mud pond.
to, instead of just going everywhere.
Hmm.
So, and it makes me happy when we have a big runoff event and I see clean water on the north side and red water on the south side of Columbia. I know it's working as it was designed. But, it's really curious, when we have red water coming from other locations.
All right, so I just want to say, thank you very much, staff. You know, you've done
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot of work. to put
Thank
all this
you.
Together and to listen to us.
Uh-oh. Go
Thank
ahead.
you, and I will just say that while I required all of the staff to help me, Ron did his part all by himself.
No, I didn't. I got it.
Credit.
Right.
Hey, Ron, can we get these emailed to us just so we can read up on it, try and remember?
Sure. Yeah, in fact, we sent one or PowerPoints from last night to one of the Hart members, so. We
All
can
right,
do that
so
if everyone.
both of them. That would be great. Thank you. All right, it is 8:19. And I adjourn this meeting by unanimous consent.
3 hours. That was.
Yeah.